All right, so I'm going to attempt to appeal to a cross-genre argument and state that superheroes are also crime fiction. Okay, so I'm gonna read from the first chapter of Shield and Crocus, which is like if you took weird fantasy and superheroes and smushed them really hard together with explosions, you get this. One-Lar's apartment was a carefully constructed ruse. The floor was spotted with yard-high stacks of books and carpeted by papers, schematics, and yet more papers. Delicate arrangements of spare parts and sealed bottles of reagents formed mounds outside lanes of traffic. Bookshelves filled the walls from floor to ceiling along three sides of the apartment, broken only by a closet, the hall to the bedrooms, and the opening to the kitchen. Over the last 20 years, the apartment had settled into One-Lar's image, scholarly, brilliant, and scattered. This was the intent. His neighbors wouldn't expect that One-Lar Gonyupaksa, absent-minded artificer and handyman, could also be first sentinel, leader of the Shields of Audek Hall, the only major force standing against the rule of the oligarchs. If they thought he was barely organized enough to keep track of whose oven he had to fix by Monday and mumbled incoherently when pressed with small talk, then they wouldn't ask questions about why he was up at all hours and never seemed to be around for parties. One-Lar stood above a table, squinting to focus on the job at hand. He was approaching his 71st birthday, but he looked no older than any other Ikonolo. He had the same square jaw, the same high forehead, sun-yellow skin, and dark brown hair. For other races, speech patterns, clothes, and personality were most of what set the Ikonolo apart, since each man looked like every other, each woman a perfect copy of another in features and build. Living side by side with the other races, Ikonolo had learned to differentiate themselves intentionally. For One-Lar, it was just another part of his cover. Favoring his left leg, One-Lar stepped over a short pile of books about rare reagents. He'd cracked his hip a year ago in a skirmish with the Smiling King, and it still took 3 cups of Donmo tea to push back the pain. One-Lar sipped from his 3rd cup of the day, taking a break from mixing the unguent that would refresh the enchantment on the shield's pendants. The oligarchs had stepped up their patrols in preparation for the upcoming summit, especially in Cobalt 3's territory, and Sapphire had nearly been caught in Bluetown on her way back home. So how can I make them last longer? One-Lar asked himself, holding the formula in his head. He'd been enchanting these pendants for 50 years, protecting the shields from the Ikonolo birthright of reading threads. Any Ikonolo could see the emotional threads that connected a person's heart to the people in the world around them, whether it was the stark yellow of fear, the brilliant emerald of compassion, or the blood red of rage. Each thread stood out to his people, thicker where the emotion was strong, thin where it was tenuous. Without the amulets to conceal their threads, any Ikonolo servant of the oligarchs could identify his or any of the shield's threads and bring the tyrant's wrath. And One-Lar had no desire to see the oligarch's servants knocking down his door or setting his building ablaze. His amulets gave them all false threads, ready-made identities that would lead Ikonolo anywhere but to the truth. The all-arm bracer on his left arm whooped. He looked down at the 6 gems to see the ruby was pulsing with light. That's blurred fists. Must be something on his patrol, One-Lar thought. He looked at the amulets, then to the window, and sighed. He gulped down the rest of his tea and stomped over to his bedroom, crumpling papers as he went. Where the living room was shabby, his bedroom was spotless, everything in its place. One-Lar threw open the closet and pulled down his long coat, one of the raiment suits, a pair of boots, and his belt. As fast as he could, One-Lar donned the raiment that marked him as first sentinel, leader of the Shields of Audek Hall. He pulled on a black shirt emblazoned with a watchful yellow eye and a turret on the chest, the symbol he'd chosen not long after the tyrants had claimed his city. He slipped into black linen pants and then snapped on his belt. The product of decades of work, his belt contained smoke bombs, enspelled wands, throwing knives, and a handful of specialized artifacts for the shield's most powerful foes. He wasn't as young as he used to be, but as the saying goes, old age and trickery beat out youth and speed every time. At least, so far, they had. Noir threw on the long coat, then opened his window and jumped up to the railing. He produced his grapple gun and dove off the balcony, firing. The hook caught a worn gargoyle across the street, and First Sentinel began swinging his way across the city. Even taking the high road over roofs and towers, swinging wherever possible. The iPad will turn off. It would take almost a half an hour to reach that district of Audex Balls in the south center of the city, where Blurred Fists was scheduled to patrol that morning. We can't be everywhere, not with so few of us and the city so large. The Shields lived spread out between the 5 domains to minimize the delay in their response. But when a spark storm erupted, they were often too late. When the storms came and went before the Shields could respond, all they could do was clear the rubble and prevent the terrified citizens from lashing out at the new spark touched. First Sentinel followed the red light in Blurred Fist's gem, which glowed the brightest in the direction of Noir's friend, like a magical compass leading him to his friend's location. As he swung down the refuse-filled alley between 2 ruined buildings to avoid a group of sentries, Noir heard Sari's voice in his mind, rehashing an old argument. Why do we even bother, Noir? We'll never win. We're always too late. How many people do we really help? More than you've gotten killed in your crusade? The memory of her words stung as he hurried through alleyways and streets, ran over buildings, dodged laundry lines, and avoided Cobalt 3's patrols. The ribs rose above the horizon as he swung north, cross-hatching the sky to form a net of shadows. I've been fighting for 50 years, Sari. I'm not going to change my mind now. Getting old means I've earned the right to commit to my bad decisions. Without Selway, he might have lost hope. The boy was First Sentinel's compass. In the cold of night when his joints ached and the guilt from 50 years of failure snuck into his mind, his son's optimism was more valuable than a legion of soldiers. While he's alive, while the Aegis continues to return to us, I have hope. Soaring over the outskirts of the corner, the district to the south of Audex Bowels, he approached the boundary between Cobalt 3's domain and that of the Smiling King. 2 blocks from the border, he swung down from a high office building toward a clock tower. Cobalt 3 had posted 2 guards at a landing just below the clock, looking west and east, with 2 more level with the clock face, facing north and south. The sentries were her basic model, no taller than First Sentinel and about as sturdy as a jury-rigged bicycle. They were piles of brass and copper riveted together and run on an electric battery, but they were skilled enough to hold a crossbow and hit people that didn't know how to dodge. But First Sentinel had been dodging crossbow bolts since before Cobalt 3 was built. He swung wide as the south-facing automaton opened fire. Then he hauled on the grapple line, pulling himself out of the way of the bolt. Using the boost in speed, he swung into the automaton and kicked it through the clock face. The sound of shattering glass echoed throughout the neighborhood, drawing the attention of every automaton for several blocks. Alarms rang out as metallic voices blared Cobalt 3's standard warning. Alert! Dangerous insurrectionist activity reported. Please return to your homes and allow security forces to protect you. Reassurance, Cobalt 3 is watching. She hasn't bothered updating that recording in years. Cobalt 3 had more of a personal touch than her creator, but only just. The alarm was all part of First Sentinel's plan. Make a scene at the tower and draw the attention there, maybe let some people sneak through the crowd in the border, get through unmolested. First Sentinel gave the guards more to focus on as he dove back out of the tower. He fell 100 feet before he caught his grapple line on a roof just inside the Smiling King's territory. Several crossbow bolts cut through the sky in his wake, but none of them came close. First Sentinel smiled as he swung onward. 1 hurdle crossed. Now for the real threat. Thank you.